to Larissa.
So before I start, I just want to once again acknowledge the IxDA as an international association that brings designs together to share practice and to reflect on our practice as well. So I want to do a big shout out for Joe and Katya because they haven't sort of really acknowledged the amount of work they put to make this, to run it. And so it's an absolute pleasure to come back to host it. And I'm very happy to be here to share a little bit of our work. So design friendly form. This is about our journey on changing our application form, the digital application form, for the last 3 years. And it's a very thin slice of a much larger journey of choosing, recognizing a need, a financial need from a customer perspective, all the way to fulfill that need and serve, whatever it is that you got with us. So I'm just going to talk about the form itself. In bank, we call them origination. It refers to originate a service with the bank. That for new customer or for existing customer. So we call origination form. So if I, by mistake, talk about origination is what it is. And for a customer, it's a very necessary step to actually get whatever they want from a financial institution. So if it might be a dream, like a house, it can be just sort of run the day-to-day finance, like an account or a credit card. So for them, it's that kind of interaction with us. Is that difficult? Yeah. Okay. So what we set up to do is turn a 3 to 5 page form. That's how they used to look, and I think we still have 1 or 2 that look like that. Into an experience, and I'll talk to you about that. That's a lot more friendly, and it's a lot more easy to go through. And so, a form that's not something that you get excited about, but you want to make that a little bit a better experience. So today I'm going to talk about 3 things. One is discipline, so design principles and design interactions, patterns, the interaction patterns. And then I'll move on. I'm trying to move the room because it's a very long room. Then I'll talk about accuracy. That's quite important for your form to be successful. You need to be accurate, and how we can help that. And as part of that, I'll talk about when we make it frictionless, so really quick to complete, and when we slow them down to make considered, that they enter the right information. So that we call that just fluency. And finally, I'll talk about building trust through design. So, and looking after the financial well-being of our customer. Now let's get started. So unless you're very new to UX, you will know that design principles anchor the design throughout the design process, the design intent throughout the design process. And the interactions is a way of keeping consistency across various projects. It's very important in an enterprise like us. We will have various projects concurrently and doing different things. So it's a way of us keeping some consistency from product and projects. So we have 3 core principles that guided our design for our applications. I was going to say origination application. The first one is focus. It's great one task at a time and just really focus, remove all distractions and do one thing at a time and only ask relevant things in a very simple way. It's about simplicity as well. The next one is about build confidence. It's about transparency, where you at, how it's going, so they are confident to continue the application. And it's about providing instant feedback. So as you progress, you say, yeah, good, let's move on. Or if there's a problem, we'll stop there and say, let's correct this. So as you progress, you feel confident that you know you're tracking well. And the third one is about humanize that experience. Like if you go to a branch or if you go to a retail, you know, people ask questions in a human form, you know, like they ask you know, questions and not sort of reading form. So we want to mimic that in our forms. So move on to the patterns. I select there are many of them. So we have done about 13 projects of redesigner applications across various products. So there are a lot of patterns, but I picked I think the 5 things that are common to all of them, and they're kind of the foundation of the way we design them. I'd like to acknowledge the studio ideas is integrity invite from everywhere. This is about inspiration, and I'll explain in a minute why I mentioned that. Is about sort of getting, you know, your work, like you look around the world for inspiration and match different things to create our own thing. The main interaction of our form is inspired by interaction created by a company called Typeform. They do online surveys, and it has a really nice interaction. So we took that and we thought that was a really good way of evolving our form, and you made it our own. So you have a different patterns over time. It's quite different how we use it, but you know that we have inspired that, and I want to acknowledge that. So first thing is structure. So you have this form is a long form, so you have some steps in the way, and you ask one question at a time. One question, second question, third question, and then you move on to the next. So it's quite the structure of all forms. This is how it plays out. So one question. You also nested questions. So this one is a nested question. So okay, add something. So we ask one question about a little thing. Another question. Yep. Go back. And we're done. Then sit back. You're good. Okay. So that kind of an example that brings a lot of those ideas together. The other thing is about input types and use of patterns, that really touch friendly. So this is the latest iteration of it. So we started just, with you want to account it's just you and someone else, and it was like buttons with words. Now there's many cases where there are different options, and we're using iconography and larger buttons to help customers to make quick decisions. So the iconography help comprehension. And then we have input fields and error handling. Okay, all our originations, if you are new to bank, you're going to have to enter your details. So we work like many iterations of that, usability testing, to make sure that we have the best possible input field and how we respond to error, to make sure they enter the right information. This is quite important because we do online checking, identity checking. So if it doesn't match how that documentation is, we won't be able to do online. So the identification. So they have to go to the branch, and if we don't want that, we want them to be able to, get things done as they try it, sort of one step into it. So it kind of gives ample versions of how you need to enter it. You also recognize, for example, for the younger demographic, and especially if they are people that haven't applied for anything formal very often, like they're under 15, under 16, they put their name is Jamie or Andy, or so we correct that and kind of play back to them, because it's important. They're going to fill on the UBS. Sometimes they lie about their age as well. They sort of, I'm too young. And again, they're going to get rejected. So you have to always be playing back those things to make sure that they enter accurate. And the final one that's common to all is about progress by. We have 3 variations. This is the first variation. Is for relatively small forms that has maybe 5 to 6 questions. You just have a progress bar. Some customers don't even notice it because the form is so fast. But, and then you have another variation where we break the form, so you have to enter personal information, and then you have to enter your finances and etc. Like if you buy a house, it would be an example of that. So you break it and you signpost. And in some case, when at the time is important, kind of the form it is, or like small business, for example, they have a time poor, so you give them some estimation of time, how long it will take, so they can plan a little bit the time they're going to sit down and do that. So you show a little bit of how long it takes. And of course, we have a pattern library. So here's an example of one of our partners, patterns. They are at the moment documenting in the Atlassian conference. We are upgrading that to a different system. But everything is there to be shared, so all the designers have access to the patterns and can refer to them. And if they change something, so we have versions of the new patterns. Why they did it, what problem they're solving, what are the delta, what is, some of the point of fails of that, because not ours is perfect. So we keep that. This is quite important, as I said, from a big company that we have that. Now move on to accuracy. So design frictionless experience is really about speed, to help them to move quickly, not being boring. So there are some examples of things that normally know. You sort of, it's not, you don't have to stop and think. You normally know your date of birth, where you live, if you rent, or if you, so you kind of, really quick interaction, and you move them very quickly through this, it takes seconds. But then there are areas that we actually want to slow them down. We call that just fluency. So one is fluency, the other is fluency. They have to make a considered decision here, a conscious decision. They understand what they're doing, and also they're entering accurate information. So on the left is how currently we're dealing with helping people to calculate their living expense. People make wild guesses, and you, as a bank, you kind of have an idea of, how much people spend, in average. So if they bank very wild, we will give them an error. So you also want to help them to calculate that. So we have a calculator that kind of suggests how much spend on this and that and that. And previously, we just had a link to it, and how many people were using it. So we were getting a lot of, wild guesses here. So we have evolved the pattern now to, make a clear option. So we're trying to slow them down. If you're confident, go ahead, enter here. But if you're not, there are ways that we can help you. And there will be a nested question, so we will open it up. The other example I have here is about other financials that you might have. So people, it's easy to remember. I have credit cards, that with another institution always here, so they're kind of their debts there. It's harder to know all the other things we consider debts, like for example, HEX debt, if they haven't paid. So what we do now is the idea of having drop downs that give all those options. So they have to stop and think, because previously you just put add, and they will add. But sometimes people just go through it and don't think about other options there, or other products that we consider that. And finally, it's about building trust. And I think design can do a lot to help that. So about 6 months ago, we launched we had a project to launch a way of people download our app, the Combank app, the banking app, starting, open an account. It would be a normal account or a saving account or end of saving account, and being, a customer in 3 minutes. So it's like, you call instant banking. And you want to do it a little bit different. You want to build a retail experience, and that was, So there's these ideas like we can do that through language and just ask questions like, if you go to a branch, how people would ask you. But we decided to take a little bit further and actually create a character that hosts that experience. So Meet Glenn was the PO, the product owner of that project, young fellow, and we make Glenn a character. So that Meet Glenn, and Glenn will host the experience. I have a couple of shots of that. So for example, this is a concept for, when there's no interaction, there's no connection, and you go, ooh, what's happening? So it's kind of a human reaction to it, as opposed to an error. The other thing is about keeping the people informed. So at the end of this, when they complete their form, it takes 30 seconds for actually to set it up, the account. So 30 seconds of looking at your mobile is a long time. And if there's something looping there, you might think that this is not working. So we took an approach of animate that and tell all the things you're doing in the background to set you up. And it's kind of, it's a little bit that, psychology of waiting because you're entertained and you know what's going on, but also keep builds confidence, because that something's happening while I will wait. So everything looks good, perfect. Okay, positive feedback. Yep, next. And the final thing I want to touch is about financial well-being and how the work that we're doing on that. This is a project we launched last week, actually. It's for personal loan. And the approach the team has taken for that one is you ask the questions you need to ask, responsible lending questions, what you need money for, how much, you earn, how much you spend money. And then at the end of it, you play that back to you and say, okay, based on what you told us, it looks like you're going to have $600 left at the end of the month. So it's sort of that kind of slow down them again and say, are you okay with that? Is that sort of, are you comfortable with that? We can make that call for them, but we can stop them and make them think. And then you give them two options. If I'm okay with that, they can continue the application. If they're not, they can go back and adjust, the amount they're asking, or the terms of the contract, to lower it a bit down. So, doing a lot of work in financial well-being this year. And you had really good positive reaction from customers. It's unusual to get positive feedback on forms, but we do get sometimes. That's so easy. So that's kind of nice. You feel good. And then the final thing is around measures. So it's a never-end job. Like we started 3 years ago. I can't name a number, the amount of people working in different applications in the bank, the design team and other teams. And then we still kind of iterating on them and improving all the time. And it's about being okay to make mistakes and not get it right. So you have a shot and you kind of get some stuff right. But then you kind of, you can move things, change things and learn from that. And then, that was better, and get more things right. Okay, let's give another go. And, improve it every time. So it's the idea of I was learning, I was improving. It's never ending sort of job. We're going back to the first one. You actually have a project that goes back to the first one you built. Again, upgrading technology, aligning a bunch of things. So that's all I had for today. So just to remind, it's about discipline, accuracy, and build trust for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. I think that's the first analogy of Angry Birds for Try Again that I've seen in a Prezzo. It's always good to throw something in there that's a nice, unique voice. I have a few questions, but I can talk to Larissa at some other time. Does anyone here have a question about? We can start here.
I just have a question about measuring and also using, optimization methods. Do you use this a lot, like testing target, A/B testing to improve the forms?
We do. We build for that. We build for testing target to be able to change everything. We actually have a team that actually just do that. Not only forms, there are other things that they also do optimization, but we have an optimization team that does that.
Yes.
Those new forms that you've built, have you got any measurements on them yet? And
Yeah.
that new style and how they're working?
Really well. So, that's interesting because when we launched the first one, which Dean would be sitting there doing, Dean, don't know Dean, you haven't been here for he worked in the first one 3 years ago, and the reaction of my big boss was, interesting experiment. There was a lot of skepticism about this because it felt a little bit over-designed, but the conversion is really good. The time that it takes, it really optimized, so it's a lot easier. Yeah.
Even for those really long forms that you've still converted to single questions, doesn't feel...
So we did, for those really long forms, say home buying, home loans, we chunked a bit the information because otherwise it would be 150 questions. So and it has to be iterative. You still kind of sometimes if there are too many questions, we chunk a little bit related question, and you saw a little bit on the PL, so it's not one single question, it's kind of related question. It's just to avoid that situation where they 150 questions later it gets tiresome. So you have to balance that out. But if it's simple, one question at a time.
Any more questions? Really haven't, Nadia. I'm going to go. I'll come back to you.
So the world's still full of paper forms
Yep.
And PDF forms. Can you sort of give us an insight into when your business decides this is the next form on the rank? What are your steps in investigating that? What methodology you use to define what the customer should be experiencing to get one of these pretty end-of-the-world designs?
So this is our style for online forms. So as I said,
So you're replacing the paper and
the
PDFs
on the-
to online.
So we don't do the PDF unless there are, there's still a couple around, but mostly we are replacing them online, but not in the branch. We do use the experience on the branch though. So we have iPads there, and if customers want to open an account, we use that experience on the branch to help it's kind of sort of it's staff assistance, if they come and they use that, because you want to show the customers that they can do themselves. And so sort of, really how simple it is, etc. So we try to do that, and also it means that you're not duplicating work. You do one and you can replicate it in many places. So we had projects we actually did the experience online, they replicated on the staff screen as well. So yeah, we're getting there. I don't think you're very far from no paper applications. I don't think, but I would tell them.
Sorry, can I just add a bit? What's the bank's policy on the signature element?
So we have online authentication. It's called ACV. So if that fails, if they fails, they need to go to branch, because sometimes it fails. It's to protect fraud. So you get high pass. So if the documentation is right, the information is accurate, you get high pass. But sometimes it doesn't pass. So they actually need to go and be eyeballed in the branch.
So I have a question about integration. Do you want to talk a little bit about this? How do we overcome this problem? For example, pre-filling, it sits in one database, doing something else in another database, and it's a real problem usually for such a big organization like Bank. So to get the information, some information to simplify the entry of the information.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenge we had is different products have different rules, they have different systems, they have different process, and it's very, very varied in there. So what I showed you some consistency on the design, but there's a lot of things that we do project by project because of those constraints. I'm not aware of things that we can't present. We have to present in a different way because of the database. But the way we collect things, there are constraints essentially. But they kind of vary from product to product, so it's not in a consistent manner. But there's, I don't know, in my career, I've never encountered a project there's no constraints, so that kind of
that's the definition of design, is creating something with constraints.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you also have a help function when people are filling out these forms, as in if somebody gets stuck, what do they do, or they just go into the branch?
So we designed for them to not get stuck to start with. But there are some tips throughout so sort of tips to help them sort of clarify. Sometimes you can't get away from some bank terms because of legality of it. So we kind of create some tool tips to help them to understand what we're actually trying to say. I think there are other methods to help them. So web chat would be another one.
From the, I guess, talking about making it humanized and making it conversational, making the questions conversational, what do you do? Sometimes a question needs greater clarification, and if a human asked it, it might be really verbose or long, like me asking a question right now. How do you kind of build that into a form, provide the clarity for us, even the older users, without increasing the time and maybe the information overload?
It's an art. We do have content producers so that they design the copy. We do mobile first, so we design responsive mobile, and that kind of really did a reality check of how wordy can you be in a question. So there are many challenges there. So the example I showed you for personal loan is one that requires a lot of explanation, to make sure that they get it right. But we try to make it as succinct as possible. So the answer I have for you is just crafting, word crafting that's done by the content team.
I just wandering over to the other side, and I'm not running because it just doesn't look good in an old man.
Hi. How did you measure the success of the transfer of a paper form into a digital format and the difference between them?
We had digital forms before we did that change. Yeah. So the ones I showed you before. I'm trying to think. You probably have some ones that for a small business, there were some that we went straight to this format. We didn't have a digital form of it. So I can't. It's not easy to compare. Paper form.
Yeah.
And
how
mostly
do you compare success from the previous way?
Completion rate. There's many things. So how completion, drop offs. There's many ways of and if they actually progress to use the account or get it funded. So you could do a personal loan and get through the process, but then never get the money because something broke in between. So there are many ways, and depending on the product. But I think get to the end of the form, it's one success. Yeah, done. And then get the product activated and up and running would be another measure, broadly speaking. So we're just looking at the form itself. So there are other things we do for make sure that the customer follow up or start using. It's called onboarding, track them as onboarding. So now that you have the products, let's help you to get it up and running.
Oh, there's another hand. I'm not running. I've got my active wear on.
Hi, So I know mobile first design is really popular nowadays. It's kind of like a trend, but is there any statistic to show mobile is the most popular device in terms of when people feeling in this kind of form, because it's kind of
Yep.
serious stuff?
So we have observed an increase of people applying through mobile. So that's in the last few years. It's quite, people are doing more and more in their mobile, and they're actually applying for mobile. There are people that do home loan application on their mobile. It's and we design it to be responsive, so it's possible, and some of them get to the end, but it's a big commitment. It will be easier on desktop just from a comfort perspective. But people do in single products all the time, probably more so than desktop these days. So sort of opening accounts and even loans and etc. Behavior has switched quite a while ago actually.
Yes, I've got time for one more question. Yes.
Thank you. The interfaces that you've shown are simple enough to be kind of one step away from like a chat pure play. So are you looking at how you can end up instigating a form thing, or basically moving towards chat?
I suspect so. It's probably the next step. I don't know if you do a full applications through chat, but yeah, it's really investing in chat. And it's also technology, but we're not actively doing any origination using chat. But it's good that you recognize that, because kind of it's meant to mimic the idea of coffee chat.
Thank you very much.
And from me, Larissa, thank you very much. I think this is the largest number of questions we've been able to fit, which is awesome. And it looks like you got a little bit of research in there as well. So everyone, if we could thank Larissa.